The Milwaukee Bucks have had the best turnaround of any team in the NBA this season. How's it going, guys? I'm Floater Alert and I just got my wisdom teeth removed, so go easy on me for talking, but I need to talk about how good the Milwaukee Bucks have been over their last stretch of games. So far, this team has won 12 of their last 15 total games after they had that incredibly rough start. Basically, they switched it on a dime and have been on a pretty impressive stretch of winning games. They just defeated the Atlanta Hawks to make the NBA Cup. Over their last 15 games, they are top 10 in both offensive and defensive rating. They're top 5 in three-pointers attempted, and they are number 1 in three-point percentage, shooting nearly 41% from three, which when you have a player like Giannis, that's kind of insane. And speaking of Giannis, let's talk about him. He is averaging about 34, 11, and 7, and he is arguably having the best year of his career. Of course, he's been dominant from up front, he can't make a free throw, and he can't shoot the three ball, and he's having an awful year from three. However, from his standard, Giannis is stretching the court out big time as he is having his best year ever when it comes to shooting up to 16 feet. Basically, that 10 to 16 foot range mark, something that Giannis has struggled with over his career, he's actually knocking down this year. He's knocking down that post fade and he's knocking down those somewhat deeper mid-range shots, something we haven't seen him do before. And of course, it's Giannis Antetokounmpo, so he's been a very solid defensive player. He probably won't be winning Defensive Player of the Year this year like how he has in the past, but he is still leading this Milwaukee Bucks defense, and of course, he has been the engine of their offense. If it were any other year in NBA history, Giannis would probably be the frontrunner for the MVP award, but unfortunately, a man from Denver is stealing that from him. But Giannis hasn't been the only player who's been having a really good year for the Bucks, and that also has to be handed to Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard is averaging nearly 24, 8, and 4, and he's basically just having a good bounce back year from last year. He's one of the best free throw shooters in the league as he's having a career high year in that mark. He's having a huge comeback year when it comes to the three ball. He's hitting a higher mark on more attempts compared to last year and is just being a little more reminiscent of that Damian Lillard that we saw in the past. We've also seen Damian Lillard and Giannis start to play together just a little bit, definitely more than what we saw last year, and those two are definitely starting to develop their own chemistry, and chemistry is definitely the big talking point of this Bucks team. And even talking from the players themselves, chemistry is definitely something the Milwaukee Bucks lacked compared to last season. That's something that Bobby Portis Jr. has actually been praising Doc Rivers for, and Rivers himself is someone who seems to have turned himself and this team around. Of course, we saw Doc receiving all the blame when this team was on their awful losing stretch, but when they've been winning games, we really just haven't been hearing too much about Rivers, and it seems like he has a pretty decent hold of that Milwaukee Bucks locker room. For Bobby Portis Jr., he has been having a pretty solid season himself. His averages have remained pretty consistent from last year. Decent defender, decent on offense, and really he's in that sixth man of the year conversation, I would say at least again, although his three-point shooting is down a little bit. Personally, I would like to see Portis getting a few more minutes compared to some other guys on the team, especially Brook Lopez, and Lopez has been one of my biggest talking points about this team, and I think it's simple. The Milwaukee Bucks just rely too much on Brook Lopez. He is a good rim protector, and he is a really good three-point shooter, especially from deep. But that's about it. When teams aren't attacking the rim, Brook Lopez in his little drop coverage gets attacked at big time, and this is something that we saw a lot in the beginning of the year and a lot when the Bucks were losing. Brook Lopez just couldn't defend anyone. In my opinion, I would like to see Brook Lopez just receive a few less minutes and not be such a crucial rotation man. Especially at his age, he is playing over 30 minutes a game, which is still pretty insane. Now, during this stretch of wins for Milwaukee, Lopez actually wasn't playing as many minutes, and he wasn't having nearly as big of games as he did. And he wasn't having a lot of very big games either. His biggest game actually came against the Atlanta Hawks today, where he hit over double digits for the first time in quite a few games. But I would like to see Milwaukee not rely on Brook Lopez as much as they do, ideally playing Giannis at the center and probably having Bobby Portis Jr. come off of the bench and play that 4 role. And speaking of the bench, they have definitely seen some solid play, both from AJ Green and Andre Jackson Jr. Both of these guys have been playing pretty solid defense, and AJ Green has been a phenomenal three-point shooter this season. And Andre Jackson Jr. too, he's definitely the better defender, but his three-point shooting hasn't been too bad either. Taurean Prince, everyone's favorite subject when it comes to talking about the Bucks assistant coach Darvin Ham, he is still playing a lot of minutes, probably more minutes than what he should be, but over the stretch we have been seeing his minutes trend downward, and he is actually leading the league in three-point percentage, shooting 53%, which is absolutely ridiculous, especially for someone who gets slandered as much as he does. One big turnaround was a guy who has definitely disappeared over the last few years, and that's Gary Trent Jr. Over the last 15 games, he has been scoring just about 10 points per game, but he's been shooting 49% from three on just over 5 attempts per game. That is a huge turnaround from what we saw before, especially when he had kind of disappeared when going to Milwaukee and not being that guy that we were expecting him to become, not being that big rotational player. He's finally seeming to develop into that role as the year goes on. So as a whole, Bucks players across the board are just playing better, and they are finally complimenting Giannis by giving him the spacing he needs. And the last player to talk about is Chris Middleton, the oldest 33-year-old that you have ever seen. Middleton has quickly become one of the worst contracts in the NBA just from the fact that he has not been on the court, especially relative to the amount of money that he's been making. Middleton is a good defender. He is one of the best mid-range shooters that we have seen in a long time, and so far in the brief time that we've seen him this year, he has been doing a pretty good job from a playmaking standpoint, and I think he can fill that role that Milwaukee needs. Of course, you have Damian Lillard, who can be dominant in the pick and roll, he can be dominant from three, and he can finish at the rim. Giannis can finish at the rim like no one else, and he's been expanding his game out this year, but you still need Middleton just for when either of those guys aren't playing well, or when they're on the bench, or just when you need the ball to go to someone else. Having Middleton come back could be the guy that starts to slowly shift this team around. Now, his averages in the 4 games that he's played so far, they don't look too insane. However, his advanced stats are backing him up for having a pretty solid year, as well as his on-off stats, showing that Chris Middleton could be a guy to help turn around this team. Unfortunately though, the fact of the matter is that the Milwaukee Bucks are one of the oldest teams in the league, and they have sold a lot of their future for their current core. And their current core, outside of Damian Lillard, is very similar to that team that won the championship just a few years ago. But as a whole, they're just not as good as that 2021 championship team. And now they're relying on Chris Middleton to come in and save the season. And as good as this Milwaukee Bucks team has been, I have to mention the fact that they have not been playing against the greatest of competition. They've definitely had a weaker strength of schedule, especially if you just look at some of the games that I am listing off here, and they have the lowest simple rating system, or SRS, according to Basketball Reference, of any team in the top 6 of the East or West Conference. They're 0-3 against the Boston Celtics. A lot of the games have been close, but eventually Boston just ends up running away with it, and they are 0-2 against the Cleveland Cavaliers. These are two teams that they need to not just be able to compete with, but obviously win, as the road to the Eastern Conference Finals is going to go through one of them. I fully believe that this Milwaukee Bucks team can compete with a team like the New York Knicks or the Orlando Magic, even when the Magic are fully healthy. I think the Milwaukee Bucks just have the second best player in the league right now, and they have a coming back Damian Lillard. But just because they're proving themselves to be in the top 5 of a very weak Eastern Conference doesn't mean that they're proving themselves to be contenders again. Of course, we're going to see them play in the NBA Cup Championship. At the time I'm making this, it's either going to be the Thunder or the Rockets, but we don't know who yet. And depending on that game, I think it can go to show how well this team can compete and how well they can go for the season. The Rockets have had an incredible start to the season, and the Thunder have been the favorites to come out of the West as the year goes on. And if the Milwaukee Bucks can compete with or beat either of these teams, it can prove to me that they can definitely hang with the best of the best. And their next game beyond the NBA Cup is going to be going up against the Cleveland Cavaliers on December 20th. So if you're like me and you're still a little hesitant on this Milwaukee Bucks team, that's the game that I want to be watching. That's the game where I'm going to be looking out for. A team like the Cavaliers can probably defend a guy like Giannis pretty well. After all, the Cavaliers have beat the Bucks twice, but they haven't beat the Bucks twice like we have seen them right now. But no matter what, it is kind of safe to say that the Milwaukee teams are at least relatively back. Earlier in the season, they were losing games that they should have won, and now they are winning the games that they should be winning while seeing the kind of play you want to see out of your star level players. But I want to know from you guys, do you think the Milwaukee Bucks are actually back, and are they actually a contender? Or are they just doing the job by beating some teams that they should be beating, but that doesn't really mean much in the grand scheme of the season? Comment down below because I want to hear your opinions, because I have a lot of mixed thoughts on this team. I am Floater Alert. If you guys liked the video, you know what to do. You comment down below because I want to hear what you guys think about the team. But that is it for this one, and I will catch you guys later.